graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
This video is not intended for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to Mornings of Mischief and this special Star Trek retrospective on Tuesdays. I'm your host, Stone Loki. Good morning, everyone, and big welcome to Vance Major Owen and Rambling Canuck. Guys, we are going to do a panel show about the seasons of Star Trek. Thank you all so much for being here. How are you doing this morning, Vance?
I'm good. How about yourself, man?
I am doing great. Rambling Canuck, how are you, sir?
I'm on the right side of the dirt, so that's got to be a good thing.
It always is. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Guys, a little backstory about this. I've known Vance for a while now, and one night, what was it, a month and a half ago, I saw Vance on a stream, and I sent him a message. I was like, "How you doing, brother? How's everything going?" And we talked, and we were talking about Next Gen, and we were talking about all the cool stuff that was in Next Gen. And I was like, you know what? Why don't we do like a small panel show? Me, you, maybe Canuck. I'll reach out to Canuck and talk to Canuck, and that's kind of how this happened. So. I know we all love Next Gen. All of us here love Next Gen. I hope you guys have seen Next Gen as well out there in the chat, that you watched it. You love good Star Trek. This was some great Star Trek. And at the beginning, a lot of us didn't know if it was going to be great Star Trek. I remember watching it when I was a kid and going, well, this isn't the same swashbuckling adventures that Kirk and Bones and Spock used to get into. Where is Sulu playing, fencing down the hallway? Where is the action? Where is the adventure from the original crew? And it would change slowly into possibly the greatest sci-fi TV show of all time. And I've been so looking forward to getting a chance to talk about it. And really quick, Mexican Iron Man with $10 super chat. For Taco Tuesdays, what are the top 5 favorite episodes in 7 years that featured Hispanic Latino representation? Q dressing in mariachi counts, even though Q is the most annoying character ever. Just kidding. Yes, that is the top one. Mexican Iron Man. Thank you so much. It's Q in the mariachi band for that $10 super chat, brother. You guys keep the fires burning bright in Valhalla. That first season, the music, the ideas, it was just it was so different. Go ahead, Vance.
The hair perm, the Riker chest that was exposed. My God, the risks that they took. Oh, the fucking Bionars going. Oh my God, it was great, man. It was great. So many levels, it was great. The thing that they had that you and I had talked about that I personally loved, the fact that they had a blind navigator in that first season. You know, I know Geordi went down in the second season on to engineering, and that was great. But that first season, they had him at the helm, and I loved it. You know, just the idea that a blind guy was driving the Enterprise, that was genius. You know, they had so many things that I thought was wonderful in that first season. You know, they had a Klingon on the bridge, even though he wasn't a tactical. You know, he was kind of useless that first season, but the fact that he was there, at eight-year-old me, I loved everything that first season had. Because God, you had Geordi there on the bridge, you had Worf there on the bridge, you had Wesley, who was still kind of coming onto his own. He wasn't a full-fledged acting ensign yet, but he was, you know, it was kind of like, what are they going to do with him? Because, you know, 8-year-old me didn't know anything about, you know, storylines and whatnot. It was still like the great unknown, you know, so the wonders of the next generation. And then lo and behold, you had an android. What is this? It was great, man.
You know, ain't no pointed ears on you, boy, but you sound like a Vulcan.
Right. You know, the fact that the fact that this wasn't Kirk, this wasn't Spock, this wasn't McCoy, and they weren't following just the captain and you know, the triad from like the original series. Because when you go back to the original series, they more or less followed the original three, but this felt like an ensemble show. It wasn't uncommon for, even in the first season, to go follow Worf or go follow Tasha or go follow Geordi, you know, to follow any of the other ones, except for Dr. Crusher. They kind of threw her out the airlock, you know, they never did anything with her. But this did feel more like an ensemble show, and it felt like a lived-in ship. More so later on, but that first season, it felt great. It felt like you wanted to go explore the universe.
Yeah, to boldly go where no man had gone before.
No one had gone before.
No one. I remember
Don't
my
be
dad being
sexist.
My dad being so pissed about that. Oh, change the whole plane, sons of bitches. Oh, God.
But it was a subtle change. It was a subtle change.
What did you think, Canuck, when you first?
Well, for me, TNG is where I entered Star Trek, right? Because
really,
I was born in '84, so you know, TNG is where I started, and then I went back and watched TOS. So for me, TNG was the first Trek, and then I went back and watched the prequel. Right? But for me, TNG was the first. So,
and you know, I remember seeing. I think it was Search for Spock. It was the first movie I remember seeing in theaters, but it was weird. The one thing I loved though was the music. And a lot of people don't like the damn music in the first season. Gene didn't like the music. Damn music takes over the whole show. They accused the composer of making the music overshadow the show, but there was some really creepy aspects to that music, especially in Data Lore, and Conspiracy, the ones where they had the little crispy crawly aliens in their necks. they eat those later. I think they eat each other. It's nasty. But the music, that music is so creepy. It's almost like a little horror movie esque as you listen to it. But they would eventually change that and go back to a more orchestra and theme and all that. But I love the music in that first season. And I thought that played a big part and kind of like, okay, well, that's kind of creepy. And oh, that's cool. And the synth music.
Well, especially in that first season, it felt very, like you said, synth. It had that 80s vibe to it. It had the 80s look. It had the 80s vibe. And it really hadn't come on to its own yet. Going back and watching it, it feels very dated, especially the episode where they're on that planet where they're running, and like the everyone's like half naked. The ladies all have perms.
Justice.
Yes,
Yeah.
Justice. I'm terrible with names, so anyone out there who's like, this guy doesn't know any of the names, like most of them I won't know. I barely know my own episodes, let alone these ones. But that episode in itself feels very dated. Go back to the episode. Ironically, I know this one, Symbiosis. It's the one with the actor who plays David Marcus from the movies. But like, look at his hair. Like that screams, 1980s.
The guys had perms.
Yeah, exactly. Again, like there's a lot from that first season that feels very dated. I would say it's probably not until season 3 where everything starts to kind of mellow out in that regard, where it doesn't feel as dated. Even season 2, it feels semi-dated, not quite as much. But in that first season, it really does feel dated to the 1980s. It feels very 80s like, especially music wise. But again, like music builds the tone of where you're at. If you go to like horror movies like Jason or Freddy, the thing that puts you on the edge of the seat is the music. It's that dun 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 dun, that makes you go, oh my god, and that's the jump scare. The music builds suspense, and that's what a lot of what they did in that first season was, like you brought up the music and data lore. That's one of the best episodes in that season, and a lot of that has to do with the suspense that they have, with the music that they have, especially when you see the crystalline entity and it's kind of a twinkling type sound and music and just the whole vibe of that first season.
They're going through that colony and there's no one there. They find that basement of the colony where Dr. Soong did all his work, and there's no one there. And that creepy ass music, you're like, what's going to come out that killed all these colonists? What's going to jump out of the shadows? You have at the beginning, you have no idea that it's this crystalline thing that killed everybody.
Right. Well, those kids' drawings of the crystalline entity where all the people are running away with sad faces and whatnot, like that's scary as shit, man. Like, I mean, like that's something that you would see out of like a horror movie where you're like, like the psychiatrist is looking at all this stuff and they're going, what are these kids seeing that we don't see? Like that's creepy, and it's just transferring to a 24th century rapper, but that's creepy, man. And kudos to them for obviously a 4-year-old didn't draw that, or a 7-year-old didn't draw that. Like it's creepy, man. So kudos to them. But the music does help build that and all that suspense of what they were going through. And then Brent Spiner bringing that full circle with filling in that mystery of like, oh no, this other android helps, bring this entity to kill all those colonists. It's like it's a wonderful mystery. And as bad as people hate season 1, because it does get a lot of a slight, it had a lot of gems in it, like Hiding Q, data lore, even the last Outpost. I like the last Outpost, which is the Ferengi one.
Yes.
The earlier episodes, I think of season one, I think are really good, because I think they had a lot of great concepts, even though some of the execution may not have been great. Because I mean, the Ferengi whips that they had in that one, I think were really great. Because I mean, if you look at like the Romulans later on, they had disruptors. The Klingons, they had disruptors. Very phaser-like weapons. But those whips that the Ferengi had, those are interesting concepts that we never saw again.
Yep.
And to me, I wish they would have shown back up. That was a really interesting concept, because the Ferengi were supposed to be the big bad of the season, and after the last Outpost, they never really were given a chance to shine in Next Generation, and I felt like that was kind of a missed opportunity. I wish we kind of would have got that, because they were supposed to be the Next Generation version of the Klingons for us. It's kind of hinted at in Encounter at Farpoint, and we never really got that because nobody really took them seriously. Can't say that I blame them, but it would have been very different had they gone the route that they were supposed to.
One thing Colin P. Smith brought up in chat, one thing I thought they did well was the "you're too valuable to risk captain" thing. Of course, Riker was almost as valuable. Way teams should really be led by junior officers. In the original series, one of the things that was big was captains transporting down with Spock and Bones.
Yeah,
the trios going down to the planet. They didn't really do that at all.
No. Picard was no, Captain. You're on the bridge, but to get kind of a laugh, because back in the day I used to do Enterprise Star Trek Next Generation reviews, and we go through season. I think we only made it through the second season on that series on my channel, but we brought Vance in. I brought Vance in, and we were the best, funniest jokes, and I bring it up because Mark brought it up in the chat, was the fact that I hated Wesley Crusher, like most normal Star Trek fans. Vance Major over here happens to like Wesley Crusher and does not agree that we should throw him out of an airlock. So those are always fun conversations for me. And because for me, Wesley was just intolerable. And for Vance, that was his hero. And so, yeah, it's just always funny to me.
Yeah, well, like the thing is, like for me, like he, like as a kid, like it was one of those things, like Burt Ward, Robin, and Wesley Crusher, like those two characters kind of influenced me as a kid. Like they kept me out of drugs, they kept me out of bad situations, because I would always think, okay, what would Wesley do? And then I would stay out of bad situations. So for me as a kid, I would be like, man, it would be really cool to be on the bridge of the Enterprise. It would be really cool to go do these things. And so like I emulated that as a kid. And then later on in life, when I actually got to meet Will Wheaton, like to me, that was also pretty powerful, So like I always, to me, it was, I love the character. I was really sad when he left in the fourth season. I was like, come back, I know that I'm the minority there, Captain Spire, shut up, Wesley. You guys, the hate. I can see where you guys, my thing is, I wish they wouldn't have made him so smart that everyone else was dumbed down when they were around him. And that's where I think that a lot of people go wrong when they write characters that are so smart, where you have to dumb everyone else down just to make this one guy look great. That's where writing fails, because I think the character was just fine. Don't make prodigies that smart. That's where I think like Star Trek Discovery goes wrong with Michael Burnham, because they make her so great that everyone else is stupid. And that's where I think they failed with Wesley, is you made this kid so smart that everyone else is a fucking idiot.
And they do that. They do that. I believe in Where No One Has Gone Before. That's the one with the Traveler. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
And they do that, and they basically tell you this kid's going to be a effing genius. You have to be very careful with this Picard because he is going to he's a Rembrandt, he's a Picasso, he's the guy that's going to basically use warp drive like a canvas.
Yeah. I feel like if they were to do things, television at the time was very different than it is now. I feel like if they were to do it again, if they were to like reboot Next Generation into like a 13 episode or hell, even 20 some episode, series, season now and reboot it, I feel like they would tell the story very differently because now we have, we don't tell stories episodically these days. We tell them with an arc, whereas back then it was done episodically. So every episode you had to know, oh, this guy's a genius, and then next episode, oh, this guy's a genius, and then episode, oh, this guy's a genius, and it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, shut up. Whereas now, hey, you got to go back and watch the last episode. If you didn't, it's your loss. So we tell stories differently. So they don't have to hammer it in as much. Whereas back then, every episode you always heard about it, and so I feel like that was part of the problem, where you had this concept of hammer this in and the story process. So it's kind of like how Voyager had the same, had a problem of, if you get battle damaged at the end of the episode or the beginning of next episode, you can't see any of that battle damage. It's like, hey, didn't we get our port nacelle ripped off last episode? It's okay. That was last week. So I feel like it's part of the storytelling process. We do it very different this week. So that's just my opinion, though.
And a real quick $5 super chat from Golgo 13, aka Brandon the Infinite Wolf. TNG was the show I started with. Season 1 and 2 were different, but 3 on was mostly great. Of course, DS9 is what solidified me, but TNG started it for me. Cheers. Thank you so very much, Golgo 13, and big thank you to Mexican Iron Man from earlier. You guys keep the fires burning bright in Valhalla, and we're going to give you guys a skull. Skull!
Pray heaven, and let's slip the dogs of war.
My thing with Wesley, I thought Wesley, when I was a kid, I thought Wesley was great. I wanted to be Wesley, just like you're talking about, Vance. I wanted to be the kid on the bridge of the Enterprise. I loved, though, the interactions between Picard and his mother in that first season, because it's so shaky. Like when he tells her, he's like, take the boy off the bridge, Dr. Crusher. And she's like, you're booting me off the bridge? He's like, oh. That there's tension between them because obviously of what happened with Wesley's father. He died under Picard's command. And I always thought that dynamic in the beginning was really interesting. And then they get rid of her. They boot her ass off the ship. They boot her ass off the ship in season 2, and I thank the stars for the people that were like, no, we need to bring Crusher back. Crusher was great. But you've got people in this first season that end up not being in the second season, and that's not something that really followed a lot in Star Trek. We lose the tactical officer. You've got this woman. A woman in the 80s is the tactical officer. She is the most kick-ass chick on the ship. She knows Aikido. She kicks some ass. She fights a death battle in Code of Honor.
She does an android.
But she's and then she's gone. And this is the danger. This is the danger of going where no one has gone before. Is you've got this entity, this slimy ass entity on this planet, and he just kills her, and he kills her for no reason, just to do it. And this will echo later in the show where they talk about her dying a pointless death, a senseless death, a death with no meaning. He killed her just to prove he could be an evil son of a bitch. And losing a cast member like that was a thing. That was a big thing back then. It just didn't happen. And of course, if that hadn't happened, Worf would have never stepped in the way he stepped in and been tactical officer. And I think at the end of the day, that was the best thing for the show. But it was shocking.
Yeah, because one of the main cast never dies.
So that was the thing. That was one of the things I think shaped TNG season 1 was to lose Tasha. Because I know me as a kid, like that had a huge impact to be like, whoa, what? Wait, she's dead? What? How could that happen? Like I know to have like one, not only a main character leave a show, but to have a main character die, like Ramblin said, like that's unheard of. Especially back then. Nowadays it's kind of like, if you watch like one of the Law and Orders or one of the CSIs or whatever, like it's kind of old hat, they do that all the time, but back then, especially a show that's in its first season, to do that, it took guts. I wasn't a fan of them doing that to Beverly Crusher, because I liked Beverly Crusher. I didn't like Dr. Pulaski, and I'm sure we'll talk about that next week when we do season 2. But I was a big fan of that first season, those characters, because I felt like, this is who we grew up with, this is who we came to the dance with, we should leave with these people, so I was very hesitant of changing the Doctor role, but I really didn't care too much about losing Tasha because we had Worf. But it was still a shock to lose Tasha nonetheless, because it's like, well, we know her, she's familiar. But when you think about it, like the only thing I really remember her doing was, she banged Data. That's really it. Outside that, like she kind of cried to Geordi about her childhood a little bit, and she had a cat. Outside a couple of vague things, I really didn't remember much about the character, and that's really sad because I think she's a talented actress. It really wasn't until yesterday's Enterprise that she got interesting, and then she became Sela, the actress. So it's really sad because she got more to do after she died than before, so I think her death really made, I don't think the series would have been as interesting had it not been for her death.
Well, not only that, but if you fast forward to when Picard gets taken by the Borg, I don't think that would have had the weight that it did at the end of that season. If Tash wouldn't have died, because we've already got precedent for a main character not returning, right? And where if she would have made it through season 1, you don't have that precedent of main character or not, we will write them off as the story dictates.
Well, and just in general, like, I don't think she could have made the constipated face that he does every time they're being told no, because Worf gets told no a lot by Captain Picard.
Yeah. Let's destroy them, Captain. No, not yet, Mr. Wolfe.
Yeah.
Really, really quick. I want to get into the scripts. If either of you have seen, or anybody out there in chat has seen, there's a documentary by William Shatner. I believe it's called Trouble on the Bridge. Yeah. And there is a lot of discussion about the early years of TNG and how many issues they had with Roddenberry's concepts. And one of the things Roddenberry did was he was getting scripts. He was getting scripts from writers of TOS. We're talking DC Fontana. There was another gentleman, people from the original series, and he was rewriting them without their permission. He was basically rewriting them and taking parts of their scripts out and then throwing them out there. He did this with the pilot, Encounter at Farpoint. He did it with Data Lore. He did it with Justice. I think the first 19 episodes were rewritten by Roddenberry because he did not believe that any of the cast, any of the main cast, any of the Starfleet officers should have conflict with each other.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is crazy. I've never heard of anything like that where the showrunner just was like, nope, I'm going to take all your shit and I'm going to rewrite it and make it my own.
So I had heard that Roddenberry was like that. I don't know the specifics, of what you're talking about with, from what Shatner had put out, but I had heard that Roddenberry was very much like that, where he didn't want there to be any conflict. Like I had heard that he was against Yesterday's Enterprise when they had the kind of the writer's room and kind of conversation of, hey, let's do this episode, and he was like, no, I don't want this war thing to happen, and they all left the meeting, and after they left the meeting, they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this anyway. And I had heard that he wanted there basically to be, the story to be the conflict, not the people, and it's, to me it's always been the drama is always good when there's internal conflict between the people, and the story should add to that. And you can tell in the first season that the mentality that Roddenberry had, because he was very hands-on in TNG in the earlier seasons, you can tell that he's got a very antiseptic perspective. If you go back to Star Trek the Motion Picture, his hands are all over that one, and that's the mentality that he has, especially considering how it's been kind of called the slow motion picture or the motionless picture. There's not really a lot to do, and it has that kind of early TNG vibe to it, where there's not really a lot to do except for, oh, this is the plot,
It's beautiful though. It is beautiful. That movie at the time was like a technical masterpiece. There wasn't a special effects department that could touch that movie at the time.
It's gorgeous, but it's one of those movies where, like, I can take my charcoal pencils and start drawing and turn the movie on, and I can look up at the screen, and be like, oh, that's beautiful, and then go back to my drawing, and then 5-10 minutes later I can look back up and be like, oh, that's beautiful, and then go back to my drawing. It's one of those movies, but it's not one of those movies where I feel engaged with the screen, and that's kind of how early TNG feels. Where it feels, you have to feel engaged with the screen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
the other thing that I think TNG really, like, that a lot of modern Trek doesn't have is just the crew seemed to fit. Like, they just made sense, and they looked good on the screen together, and they complemented each other. Not meaning that they gave, like, compliments, oh, your hair looks good, or you're good at your job. They complemented each other on screen so well. And you could literally see them being a crew. Whereas modern Trek seems to forget that part of it just a little bit. But TNG, the crew seemed like the crew. Like, it made sense. And the dynamics between the crew was always front and center, whereas nowadays you have one or two crew members and then the rest are just kind of background, and I think that's what's missing from a lot of the newer Trek in a lot of ways.
The crew aspect, the family.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed like they had confidence in the story that they were telling, where if the scene or the episode was about those certain crew members, like, they had confidence in the story that they were telling, where now they don't have as much confidence in the story. They just only have confidence in, no, we're going to only tell about this character. They don't have as much confidence. They only want to do this one character and that's it. We only have stock in this one character and that's it. Or maybe it's a money issue. We've paid this one actor or actress, buku bucks, so we're going to give them the most amount of screen time. Whereas back in the day, they're like, heck no, we got the guy from Reading Rainbow, and we got the guy who played the goofball on Night Court, and we got Patrick Stewart, and we got the guy who's been in half dozen soap operas, and they truly had an ensemble cast, but they had a bunch of, for lack of, I hope nobody's offended, but they had a bunch of C-list actors, who weren't trying to upstage each other. And it truly made for a great product, and so you could write for the character and not necessarily the actor.
The one of the things they got away with that Gene really pushed for in this first season, and they do it in the first episode, because he said if they hadn't have done this in the first episode, they weren't going to allow them to do it, was engineering. They weren't going to build engineering. And Gene pushed for them to build this engineering section, and later admitted, yeah, if we didn't ever done that, they would have never built it. You wouldn't have that engineering deck, at least the way we all saw it. Since that first episode, it might have been something different. It might have been smaller. It might have been something like Scotty had. Scotty had that one room, and with like the engines behind a fence that obviously was some sort of tarp or tapestry or something, where it looked like it went on further. But we wouldn't have got that. We wouldn't have gotten an engineering section if it wasn't for them pushing it. We have to show engineering in this episode, otherwise we're not going to get to build it. They're not going to let us build it. They were operating on, I think, 1.3 million an episode at the time. That was a lot of money back then. That was a lot of money, and it wasn't enough money to do the special effects. They got very, very lucky with the special effects. And really, real quick, I've got two super chats. One is from Captain Spire for $10. Thank you so much, brother. And he says, the one thing I was thrilled with in the re-release DVD Blu-ray of Star Trek The Next Generation, they updated effects, like in Darmok, they fixed the phaser fire from the saucer instead of the photon tube. I did not notice that. I have the Blu-rays and the DVDs. I have to go back and check and look at that. I've got the VHS. I've got VHS tapes too, that I got from Columbia House still. But I'll have to go back and look at that. I did not know they did that with the Blu-ray. And Roger H sends $1.99 Canadian super sticker and a thumbs up. Thank you so very much, Roger H. You guys keep the fires burning bright in Valhalla. Skol! I think I did the wrong IP.
Yeah.
I think I did the wrong. I don't think that's Star Trek. I don't think that's Star Trek. I think I did the wrong IP. Thank you guys. What?
Well, that was something else that I thought was, not only did they do the engineering, but something else that blew me away as a kid, the stretch effect of the warp. That blew my mind as a kid, because it's like you're seeing stuff that you don't even see in the movies. Because in the movies, it's just like a light streak and a cool sound effect. This was something where it's like, whoa, the ship stretches and you got that cool light effect, like, and the stars streak by, and it's just like, what is this? And this is on a television. Whoa! And it blew my mind. And then in the pilot episode, and then in one of the other episodes in the first season, you get the saucer separation. Again, what is this? 8-year-old me, it blew my mind. And that's something else, like, it was too expensive to do on a weekly budget, but originally the concept was every time they go into battle, the ship separates. But, it was just too expensive to do on a weekly case. But that was something that was it was so impressive to do. I mean, that was pure genius to do from a ship design perspective. To have this ship separate. That's something that was talked about on the original series. I think Kirk said, prepare to separate or something, but they never actually did it.
No, it was an emergency. It was an emergency
Yeah.
procedure.
Yeah.
That was like their lifeboat, and they couldn't reattach it. They had to go to a
Right.
starbase to have it reattached.
Right. And this was something where the only problem I have is that you took like another 4 minutes to have Riker, manually attach it, and it was just like, oh, good Lord, we got to see it. Thankfully, they didn't do that again with when Geordi had, after Geordi was in command and went into battle and they separated. Thankfully, we didn't see that again. But it was great that they actually went there and had the ship separate, because again, they did things that we weren't used to seeing in Star Trek, and it wasn't just regurgitated slop that was TOS part 2. And that was one thing that I loved about TNG. As a kid, the one thing that a kid hates is shit that their parents had. They don't want to see what their parents had. They want new stuff. They want if your parents had Nintendo, you want PlayStation. If they want the new, they don't want the stuff their parents had. So 8-year-old me, I loved Next Gen. I didn't want to watch TOS. I didn't want to see the Jolly Rancher looking buttons. I didn't want to see that stuff. That was Captain Kirk stuff. I didn't want my captain to sleep with 20 million women. I want my captain dignified, bald. So seeing stuff that was different than TOS, I loved that. And that's what TNG season 1, even though it had its flaws, I loved that. And the saucer separation I thought was great. It had wonderful set designs, even though it had some piss poor lighting, because good God, those early episodes they had some weird camera angles and some bad lighting.
Yeah, that was like parts of the bridge weren't even lit up yet. Yeah, you go back and you're like, wait, well, why is there no light on the turbo lift doors, and why does the whole back of the ship look dead, and what the hell's going on?
There's no lights because we built engineering, so deal with it.
Yeah. The next season, damn it. One of the things that I loved hearing about was how the VFX department did the ships, how they overlaid it on space, and they did this to save money. They were using this one company. I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this company. I'm not that good. But the way they did it was they like had the model and they overlaid it over a scene in space, and it was something nobody had ever done before, and they were doing it on the cheap. As many of you know, I said earlier, 1.3 million an episode. They did not have a lot of money left over after everything to do those special effects shots. So a lot of the stuff you see is reused over and over. It's one of the things they learned to do. Let's reuse this and let's reuse that. And we'll reuse the saucer sep and we'll reuse all this stuff to put it into these episodes. And they just didn't have the money. Doing the Ferengi ship almost broke them in that episode you were talking about, the last Outpost. Doing that Ferengi ship, that was a big thing. And they had to do it on the cheap, and they used model kits, they used all kinds of shit, and that connects it back to the original series, where they were, we'll just get a model of the Enterprise, a model kit. We'll go down to the store and we'll buy a model kit and we'll take a blowtorch to it, and that'll be the Defiant, or that'll be the Constitution, or whatever it was that was going to be in that episode. They used model kits they bought from the store. That's crazy.
Yeah. That was that looking at the early days of, you can tell because they they had to reuse the Excelsior model. They used the Miranda class model that they had, the Reliant. And a lot of times you would see, let's stick a radar a deflector dish on the Miranda class, and now it's a different type of Miranda class. It's funny to see those things, because especially when you get into the wonderful high def TVs we have these days, you can see that's not a different class of ship. That's just a glued on deflector dish on that. And damn it, Starfleet, you're getting pretty cheap in your labor these days. No wonder the Borg are taking us out every other week. No wonder the Dominion wants to come through the wormhole and fuck us up. But I'm sure they never thought we'd have such clear televisions to see things these days. But you go back to the early days of next gen, and you can see the imperfections of what they were using. But it's quite genius to see what they were doing, because that's what they had. And they were clever in everything they did. Going to like the Borg, the Borg ships, a lot of that stuff is simply just bit pieces that they kind of threw together, whatever they could find, and that's what classic sci-fi did. When you go to battlefields, any type of space debris, that's kind of what you do, is you grab those bit piece parts and you just kind of put them together. It's kind of what you have to do, especially when you have no budget for those type of things. You look around your house and go, well, this space gun is, I got this, gun from the circus. Let me spray paint this black, add a little tubing to it, and there we go. And you got to be creative, and that's what they were in the early days. They were very creative with what they had. We're very lucky we got the quality that we did. Those people that like to nitpick the early TNG. Look at the Soleil and the Antikins, which I was very sad that we never got more of those.
Yes.
Because to me, so many aliens we got, which were just humans with weird noses or weird cheap forehead wrinkles. Like, man, screw that. I don't like those aliens. I never did. I like the full-fledged, even if they don't talk, just put a full mask on them. Let's see some weird funky looking aliens. I like that. The Soleil and the Antikins, those were cool. And I was really sad we never saw those again.
If you guys had to pick one episode, if you had to get rid of all the other ones and only keep one episode from this first season, what would be your top pick?
The Ramblin', you go first. I got to think about this, because there's so many.
Yeah, for me, because I suck with names and titles. For me, anything with Q in it. Because for me, that's what drew me in, was Q. Like, Q was just my favorite character throughout TNG. Q is just, anytime Q's on screen, I've got to watch. So.
And chat, by all means, throw yours in here too. Do you think you can pick one, Vance, or you want me to go?
I think for me, I would have to say, Data Lore. I think when the mystery that slowly builds to what happened to the colonists, to then finding, Brent Spiner. It's the first real time that we get to see, the acting chops on Data. That he's more than just Data. He's playing both Data and Lore. You get to see Brent really stretch himself as an actor in Next Gen, and everybody kind of has a little piece in the show. Tasha gets a little bit to shine, Geordi gets a little bit to shine, Wesley gets a little bit to shine. Worf, I love when Worf walks in the turbo lift and Lore, pretending to be Data, makes the turbo lift close, and then Lore's basically just like, bring it, bitch. And then Worf hits him, and then Lore just punches him, and it's just like, oh, dude, and it to me, I was just like, oh man,
Show me your Klingon fierceness.
yeah. I love that, because it's like, up to that point, like Worf was the biggest badass on the ship, because you never really thought of Data like that, because Data's not intimidating like that, but it really showed that Data could be formidable if he wanted to be, but he chooses not to be. And Worf wouldn't stand a chance. So it really painted a very different picture of that whole dynamic. And I loved that whole away mission in the lab, where they're trying to piece everything together, and Riker's really good in that scene. So I feel like everybody had a little bit to shine, but as being a big Data fan as a kid, I really loved seeing Brent in that, playing both parts. And then at the end, when Data, he loses his brother, it's very sad, without being sad for Data, So I would have to say Data Lore is probably my favorite from the first season, because it gives you a lot, without giving you too much, and then knowing that you get a sequel later on with brothers, it's great. So
there are not many times in this first season where you see Picard come out of his shell. There is this shell they built around the character where he doesn't interact with everybody like they interact. He is very closed off. He is the captain. I'm at the top of the ship. I give the orders. We don't fraternize. We don't do this. We don't do that. But then in, oh my God, I'm blanking now. The Big Goodbye. In The Big Goodbye, there's a scene where he is being interrogated by these two holodeck cops, and he's like, oh, this is absolutely wonderful, and you're like, holy shit, he's smiling, and he's having a good time, ladies and gentlemen. Picard is having a good time, and that's because he read these books, and now he's in this holodeck, and he's not just reading a story, he is Dixon Hill, and he's absolutely giddy about it. He is absolutely having a good time. And this is wonderful. Oh, look, there's Beverly. Come here, darling. And it's just like, wow, he's not a machine. The one guy that's more of a machine on the show than Data, besides in The Naked Now, because he's like, hello, doctor. Let's get jiggy with it. He actually has emotions, and he has a heart, and he's having fun. And that's something that is so alien to that character that you don't really see much more of it until after he's assimilated by the Borg. It took that happening for him to kind of come out of his shell as a character and be like, no, I'm going to go on the holodeck and I'm going to go do this. And even at the end of the series, when he sits down to play poker with everybody, which I don't want to get too much into, because we are going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. I think it evolved his character, but to see that in this first season, it was rare. It was so rare. Picard, Robert Linden, Picard kept a tight ship. That is right. He kept a tight ship. This is the way it is. We don't fraternize. I've got the counselor if I need to talk to somebody, and that doesn't even come up till later. So, it was just, I love The Big Goodbye. I love the setting. Of course, I love gangsters. So I think all the 50s, the 40s and 50s gangster stuff's absolutely awesome. And the fact that they did that, I absolutely love that episode. And I'm a huge Data Lore fan. I love Data Lore. I love conspiracy. But I've got to go with The Big Goodbye as my favorite.
Yeah, it's a good episode. You bring up conspiracy. I think that rates up there too, because it's a whodunit. That one,
Did you think that should have been the end of the season? Because that so felt like an end of the season show. Starfleet getting taken over by these aliens. You know, the end of the episode, you find out, oh, there was a signal. Nothing ever comes of that either. It's so shitty, except in Star Trek Online, you find out some stuff. But
I do. I feel like it more so than the Romulan buildup. That was in I forget that
Neutral
episode
Zone.
name.
Neutral
Yeah,
Zone.
yeah. And again, I like that episode. But to me, that was more of a personal story than Conspiracy. Conspiracy, I feel like you return to Starfleet and you find out this whodunit, type, that to me, that would have been more of a full circle type story, because you started the show learning about humanity, and then you would have ended the show full circle learning about humanity and going, oh shit, what have we stumbled upon? To me, I felt like that would have made the whole series complete. If you wouldn't have returned for a second season, it would have made the show feel complete. I don't feel like Neutral Zone was an appropriate season ender, although I do like the last words of "We are back."
Yes.
Like that's appropriate, but I feel like as an episode, I feel like Conspiracy was the way to go, and that's the way I would have gone, because again, you get the sense of what is what is happening here, and you have to know what's coming next. But they did drop the ball with never returning there, and I, for someone who doesn't pay attention to Star Trek Online, I have no idea, and to me, I don't know why no one's ever gone there in a series, and we're now like what 7-8 series later, a couple cartoons, it's like why have you guys never gone back there? I mean, all you got to do is like, stick a skin tag off someone's neck and you got an alien. Like that's all you got to do. Why have we never returned there? Why have we never explored that? Especially when you had Voyager in that part of the quadrant. Like why have you never gone back to this alien? If you're talking about money constraints, really? It's a human. Come on. But the one thing I will say about Conspiracy, the old guy that they had fighting Riker, get a better body double, because that fight, come on, man, really? Oh, come on, don't do that again. That was terrible. So anyway, I digress.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for being here today for this episode. Big thing, guys. Vance has a awesome channel called No Budget Productions. He does Star Trek fan films. Yes, you call them fan Star Trek fan films. Some of the coolest stuff. The Constar Chronicles got me into what Vance was doing, and it is some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen. And he does it with practically no budget. It's called No Budget Productions. But if I'm correct, Vance, you have a little bit of a budget. It's just you try and use everything you possibly can to make this.
Well, technically I have, I'll do a fundraiser from time to time, like maybe $1,000. But I mean, when you have, 100 and some, like 107 films with $1,000, I mean, it's, you're pinching pennies there. Technically it's some budget, so maybe it should be like, low budget productions, but I mean, it's nothing, so, I mean, yeah, it's some budget productions. How's that?
But he's got some really awesome stuff. I know Chris Persia and Purple Valkyrie and Mark Infinitely Tired have been throwing links out to his channel. Check him out if you like Star Trek fan films. Even if you don't, you just want a really cool, some really cool stories. He has got some really kick-ass Star Trek stories. So if you can, check him out. If you like his stuff, like, share, subscribe, bang that bell, and be prepared, because he's got more stuff coming. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Rambling Canuck is one half of History with R&R, and that is another great channel, guys. Check him out. Mark just threw a link out for his channel. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, Canuck?
Well, right now we're kind of on pause, but when I get back, mainly Rambling Canuck is basically my goof off channel. I do Minecraft and karaoke, and for some reason, people come and sing. I don't know why, but they do. And then on History with R&R, we have a very popular radio show that I bring in people for voice acting things. We do different parts of history, and we act like we're actually there. And then I do a show with Mark the Infinitely Tired, which is the History Roundtable, me, Jeff, and Mark. And then normally Mondays I do a live stream with Jeff Franklin, and we just have fun with it.
Heck yeah.
It's a little bit easier way of looking at history, because a lot of history channels, like if you go on YouTube and you look up history, a lot of the history channels just sit there and they just regurgitate facts, which I find boring and droll. So I like to throw a little bit more of like a conversation way of it, and not giving you all the details, but just kind of perking your interest into certain things in history that don't get talked about a lot, so that, you know, maybe you'll go and look at something that doesn't get a lot of attention, and yeah, go from there.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. Thank you guys so very much for being here. We will be back next week with season 2 of our TNG retrospective, our Star Trek The Next Generation retrospective. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great and wonderful day. We will be back tonight with the comic book roundtable on Clobbering Times' channel. So make sure that if you are not subscribed to Clobbering Times, you guys like, share, subscribe. If you want to hang out with us at the Comic Book Roundtable, we're going to have a couple of mystery guests come on and hang out and talk comics for tonight. But we will see you then. Everyone, please stay excellent, be excellent to each other, and have a great Tuesday. Goodbye, everybody.
Have a good one.
Take care.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.